Welcome back to Saints Unscripted. We have a very special guest, David Ostler, and
Me.
and
And,
and
what?
and Spencer.
Yeah.
And Spencer. He's been in the show before, but
Yeah.
now you're a guest host right now.
Yeah, I am.
By the
Very
way,
amazing.
it's not that I missed the memo for button-ups. I did not know they were wearing button-ups.
David and I had talked to each other beforehand, and we planned it out just to kind of humiliate Quake.
They wanted me to look like the odd man out, which is exact opposite of what your book teaches. So.
Today we're going to be getting into issues relating to faith troubles, faith crises, and we have David, who's written this amazing book called Bridges, published through Greg Coford Books this year in 2019, and it's going to be amazing.
Before we dive right into it, if we were to put you, Adam S. Miller, and Patrick Mason in a room with a bunch of boxing gloves, who do you think would win?
We'd probably just start talking to each other and kind of fall asleep.
I mean,
I'm putting my money on Dave.
Okay.
I'm putting my money on Dave.
All three of us are pacifists. It just won't happen.
yeah. So first, why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote the book. It kind of came out of somewhat of a church assignment. In our stake, my wife and I had been called to serve as church service missionaries, reaching out to people who don't come to church. And we decided we'd ask them why they don't come to church, because we all have preconceptions on why someone would stop coming to church, but we decided to ask them. So we sent out about 800 letters in our stake with my wife and I's phone number, email, some sort of survey link, and started asking them. And as we did that, we found that some of the reasons that we hear, maybe trivialized in Sunday school is why people don't come, weren't the experience of the people we were asking. Mm-hmm. So we kind of formulated some tools for our stake to understand that better, and ultimately it became a book, because that misunderstanding of why people might disaffiliate or have struggles with belief, if we don't understand those issues well, we can't reach out and we can't minister to them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, because right now in the United States, churches are struggling to keep members in because the world is changing. And a lot of problems people have with religion, especially Orthodox religion, is that it seems to go to a different tidal wave than what our culture is going toward. And not in many ways. So, I'm a Netflix addict, right? And I watch so much Netflix, and that almost becomes just like a weekly ritual, a weekly habit. And I should study scripture sometimes. Or there's like deep problems that people can have, things with just general lack of belief in God. Sometimes, people have depression, mental illnesses that stop them from feeling the Spirit and things like that. So it's a bold thing to take on. I mean, it's a pretty bold thing, but it's necessary.
Yeah, to figure out like every possible reason why someone might leave a faith or leave our particular faith is, it's got to be a daunting task, and it's got to be something that might, be. I mean, at least for me, I think it'd be very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I was a church leader. I've been a bishop and a stake president and a mission president, and but I'm not in your generation. And the reasons why people disaffiliated from my time, or even at my age, are very different than they are now. And there's less trust in authority and in institutions. Right. I think coming out of things like the Great Recession or 9/11 or the educational debt crisis that so many people feel, those are just different issues than what I faced. And so I really wanted to deep dive in and understand what are the issues. And you mentioned, a broad level of religious disaffiliation that's affecting, the U.S. and maybe some other developed countries. And, many people leave religion entirely but retain spirituality, right, because the institution for them becomes difficult, or they just are more individual and want to experience it on their own terms.
Right.
And we experience that in the church no differently than other religious institutions, both Christian and otherwise, in the United States.
I can kind of echo that in the sense that I do believe that people do, even if they kind of disaffiliate from a church, I think that a lot of people still have kind of that religious impulse. We still all want to believe in God. We still all want to believe in a higher power. Now, many of us don't, but I just believe that desire to seek God and to have kind of a connection with the higher being still remains very part of the kind of collective human experience, for sure.
One of the other reasons why I wanted to write the book is that many people my age now have adult children, and some of those adult children, in spite of going to seminary and going on missions and marrying in the temple, have left the faith. And parents don't know what to do when there's a lot of pain. And we have a theology that talks about eternal families. And when we have a child that has gone a different direction, we clearly want them to be with us in eternity. Sometimes we don't understand how to act in a way that builds relationship. And so I wanted to be able to provide some tools for kind of people in my generation, whether they're leaders or parents or brothers or sisters, to be able to understand these kinds of issues too.
Okay. So how has the book helped people?
It's been interesting. I did a couple things with the book. I did some survey work. I surveyed leaders. I had 520 stake and ward leaders respond to a survey questionnaire that I did. I asked about 80 questions. And then I had about 320 people in a faith crisis respond to kind of similar issues. And then I interviewed about 50 people in a faith crisis. And it's been interesting. Both leaders and parents and people in a faith crisis have all sent me notes and responded to the book in various ways. I had a mother, for example, send me a note, and she said, I wish I would have known this about 5 years ago. I've ruined my relationship with my daughter, and described in some detail how her immediate reaction of defensiveness and testifying and saying, trying to refute every one of her points of her daughters leaving the church, as opposed to loving them and trying to find common ground, had kind of poisoned her relationship. And so, you say, well, you can just ask for forgiveness and say you didn't know better, and talk to me and tell me, what you're feeling and how you're feeling it. I've had notes from leaders. I know there's a stake that all their leaders are reading the book now, because they feel it's so important to be able to address the concerns of people that are struggling to feel like they belong at church, or that they can trust their church leaders, or that they are getting answers to the most spiritually important questions in their lives. And then I've had people that struggle with faith. And some of them have reached out to me and felt like, that I heard their stories, and that for the first time people were listening to what they really were feeling. So from all three audiences, I've had really positive responses.
So kind of as a follow-up to that, what you were mentioning, you mentioned that there's a number of different issues why someone might leave the church, and that some people might not understand those issues. But how would you go about, I guess, because I feel that there are issues for which people can have very, very valid concerns about. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes it's good to correct misinformation where it might have been shared, or where a misconception where it might have been shared. So how do we kind of balance that relationship between maybe trying to correct a misconception or just listening and empathizing with someone? What's maybe your perspective on that?
I think that's a great question, and it's one that we all struggle with.
Yeah.
The research shows that if a person doesn't have a strong relationship with someone else, and we start giving them advice, it actually drives them further away from hearing that advice in any sort of way. So, I think a key is building a strong relationship and letting them know that no matter what they say, that you'll be their friend or their family, or that you'll love them, and that you're going to accept that the concern is valid to them. And over time, and I don't think it happens immediately, because many of these people are their faith crisis is very important to them and is very emotional. It takes time to build that kind of relationship. I know it has with close family members where I have tried to build that relationship. But over time, we can develop that relationship where we can have these conversations without them feeling like we're going to testify to them. We're going to tell them that they're under the influence of Satan, where we're going to call them anti-Mormon, where we're going to label them the fallen elect, and so many of the words that we could use.
I have failed you, Anakin. I have failed you.
Create division that means that we have no relationship for having that kind of conversation.
Oh, that's important.
So your suggestion is more to kind of like develop the relationship with the loved one first, and listen to their struggles, understand their struggles, trying to understand them as best as possible.
Yeah.
And then once you've kind of developed trust with them, then you can share maybe some of your particular concerns with them about what they've shared.
So many people that are in a faith crisis feel completely misunderstood.
Yeah.
They feel like we judge them and we say that they're lazy, or that they've been offended in some way, or they want to sin in some ways. And when you ask them, or at least in the 320 that I asked that responded to my surveys, those were minor issues. They had bigger issues. And you know what the issues are. They're issues of church history or authority, or church's position on sexual orientation and gender identity. So these are issues that are important to them. And when they express it and people kind of judge them as, well, there must be some secret sin in your life that's caused you to lose the spirit of after you served a mission and married in the temple. And so when we trivialize that and don't give them a way to express their feelings honestly, we'll never really have dialogue with them. And, we hear it sometimes. We sometimes blame people that are in a faith crisis for something they did or didn't do ardently enough, or, if you just read your scriptures more and more and more. But, as I interviewed these people and as they responded, many of them were doing all those things. And I don't want to pretend why I know a faith crisis happens for some person and not for another, why someone learns a particular part of church history and it bothers them but not another. I just accept that it does bother them, and that it's a legitimate issue for them, and it becomes something that's so important to them that they have to evaluate kind of their whole set of relationships and beliefs that, really is very catastrophic for someone to have to go through and kind of rebuild their identity.
So something I've noticed in the conversation between former members and active members is there are three words every time they come up: bad news. It's "I don't understand." I hear it with people who will say, "I don't understand how you could stay in the church in such and such," and someone could say, "I don't understand how you could leave the church after doing all this." And then, without that lack of understanding, they sort of grab their banner and their pitchfork and they go into battle.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand, your reaction shouldn't be, "How could you do this?" or "Why would you be part of this?" because I don't understand. It should be, "So how can I understand where you're coming from?" And I don't necessarily think that's a problem unique to Latter-day Saints. I think we're just a stubborn culture in general, just as people in this fine nation, and we're stubborn, and we don't really like to hear not necessarily the other side, but sides that we don't align with, and that's politically and that's socially, and that sort of thinking does get into the church. And so it's nice that there is, like, you've written this book that's kind of trying to say, hey, maybe we can rise above that sort of the tribalism, that triviality.
There's one part of the book that I'm just kind of embarrassed that I wrote. And it took a big part, but it's really a significant part. It's, how do you listen?
Linda, listen.
Listen,
Linda.
And that seems so stupid to have a section in the book on there.
Just addressing how to listen to
How to
someone.
listen, and I had to kind of be reflective of, when I was a bishop and someone was sitting across the desk and we were talking about hard things, was I really listening to them? Or was I trying to kind of formulate my response? Was I trying to figure out how to bear my testimony in such a way that that person's concern would go away? Or did I really kind of in my heart have a prayer to say, I really want to know what's inside that person's heart? How do I ask the questions? How do I take off the blinds? I don't live their experience, right? I'm a white man, middle class, grew up in the church. The person sitting across me is different than me. Their life experience is different than me. And if I don't intensely listen and try and understand who they are, how can I help them?
Right.
And so it seems so stupid to have a chapter. It's a half a chapter in the book about how to listen. But it was really important to write. And as I've gotten feedback, that's been something that has really been important for people to feel. And pretty much everyone who reads that realizes that there's things that we can learn there. And I kind of take it back to Christ a little bit. You remember when this woman with an issue of blood touches the hem of Christ's garment, and she's healed, and Christ says something like, "I feel virtue come out of me." I'm not sure I really understand what that means, but he turns and engages with the woman, and starts talking with her, and allows her to have voice. And in that moment, she is both healed physically, and also she's heard and connected. And so I think there's moments like that where we really need to immerse ourselves into that other person and understand their experience. And primarily we do that through listening. And you're right, we don't do it in politics well, we don't do it in society, we don't do it at the dinner table, Yeah. And so why wouldn't it translate into the way in which we relate to people at church or around religion or spirituality?
Yeah, I think that these issues are among the most sensitive to deal with, because you want to listen, you want to empathize, you want to sympathize, but then you always kind of have a little bit of an impulse to respond. And sometimes you have to take just that extra little bit more time to listen before you understand. Right. There's just that little bit more time before you fully understand. And then you have to balance that with, well, I disagree with your concern in this way. And so, because I think that people can have valid disagreements on that. I think that these are definitely issues in which we should have some disagreement, but I do agree that I think that there is something that we can do as far as just making a little bit more effort to understand the issue itself, and then what else is behind that issue.
I've even found that sometimes I'm talking to someone who's left, it's not necessary for me to bring up that I disagree with them.
Yeah.
They know me, so they know I do, right? But I find sometimes I just listen, hear them out, and I kind of leave it at that. Oftentimes they'll know that you disagree. They'll know where you're at, but they just want to know that someone's going to hear them out and treat them like they're intelligent. Right. And so...
Right, but I'm just saying that, can you balance that with data that maybe you felt has been helpful to you in reconciling the same concern, or something of that nature? What's your...
Once you have a relationship, you can kind of have those conversations where someone who has a faith crisis, they're all nervous about what does that mean for them. Do they lose their job at BYU? Are they able to go to the temple to see their daughter married? Will their friends allow their children to come over and play at their house? Will they be labeled as apostate or whatever? So there's this huge fear, and I have data on that in the book that kind of shows how difficult it is for them to disclose what they're really believing because of sometimes our culture of judgment and refuting and the true social costs that can happen to people on this. There's also kind of real traumatic emotional issues that come where you feel I've invested in a mission, I've testified to this, now I don't know whether it's right or I don't think it is right. Did I lie for 2 years? Was it wasted? What have I done with my life? Do I have...
What have I done?
So there's a lot of issues that get there, and I think that it takes more time than we would expect to be able to go through the relationship building that can occur and should occur, where we can have a relationship that then allows us to say, here's some approaches, where I suppose where they ask us maybe is where the relationship really should get, where they ask us because they want to know and they think we have something to contribute.
Right. Yeah.
If they don't think we have anything to contribute, we're just kind of just poking them.
Yeah. Right.
It seems.
I like that a lot.
So this is the book called Bridges, Ministering to Those Who Question. It's a wonderful book. It comes without tabs, and you should go get it. We'll have a link below. But thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for giving us your wisdom. Also, this is
Kind of
Richard
amazing.
Ostler's brother. He's been on the show before. We've had 2 Ostlers on the show.
I'm proud to be Richard's.
Both are the most amazing,
You're both
kind,
very,
loving men ever. Just,
Like shockingly kind.
yeah, like shock, like both you and your brother. Like it's
Almost like the CIA, like Russian.
it's almost too kind. Yeah. What's
So
a,
if both of us were in a cage, what would happen, do you think?
ooh, like if you're talking about a fight between you and
I think you guys will look through the bars at everyone in the audience and be like, so
like,
why are
please
you doing
take us out of here. Like, why are
Does
we
this
even
make you
doing
feel good?
Yeah.
It shouldn't. I have a book you should read.
I think we'd probably hug each other first and then do that.
Make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave your comments in the comment forum below.
Yes, like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.